Hello, I'm here to talk to you about the 10 books that I read in October. It was a little bit of a slower reading month for me this month because I was dealing with some health stuff and I couldn't really focus on reading, and I got really into knitting, which made it hard to read because all I want to do is knit. So I've been listening to audiobooks, which I'm grappling with because I don't know how to judge an audiobook in the same way I judge a physical book. I feel like most of what I think about the book is dependent on how the like voice actor reads it out. Keep in mind, for the two of these books that I listened to, I don't know what I'm fucking talking about yet. I still have to figure out how to judge audiobooks. This is my stack. Looking at it, and I know one that was 600 pages long is missing from here. This actually does seem pretty reasonable for me, but it felt like I wasn't reading a lot. Maybe because I was knitting so much. Let me show you. Let me really quickly show you what I was knitting. Okay, I've been learning how to do like stranded color work. Please ignore the fact that this hat is really fucking small. I was trying something and it didn't work. But look at that. That's a design. I had never been able to do that before, and now I'm making this one. It's really hard for me to stop. I can't write with a pencil right now. My wrists are fucked. So I really got to take a break, and I'm hoping to take a break and get back into reading physical books. We started off the month strong, but also like, oh my god, and that was with Tampa by Alyssa. This follows a woman who becomes a teacher so that she can prey on middle school boys. It is so disturbing, so disgusting, so fucking depraved. It's the most fucked up book I've ever read in my entire life. When I first started this book, I started reading it and I was in the bath and I had to put it down. It was like, you have to read this fully clothed. You get so inside the head of this absolutely sociopathic character who only cares about herself and her own needs and desires, and it doesn't matter to her what happens to anybody else. Like, all that matters is preying on young boys. It's so fucking sickening. It's visceral. It is some of the best writing that I've ever read, which I think that it had to be. I think you couldn't have published this book if it wasn't really well written. It's fantastic. Not enjoyable though. It's awful. It's so awful to read. So audacious to write a book like this. But she did it. And honestly, she did it well. It's very tense because she'd lose everything if what she was doing came out, but also you really want her to get caught because she's so fucking disgusting and you hate her so much, but also the writing's so good that you want this story to keep going. So it causes this conflict within you that is like kind of hard to deal with. I hated this and I loved it and I thought it was great and I thought it was terrible. Ugh. The cover? Like, what the hell was this? It's so fucked up. Then I read a book that was a lot lighter and did not, like, I guess, take itself seriously, and that was A Touch of Jen by Beth Morgan. I thought this was fun. I think that this is, like, a very specific niche group of people will like this book, and I'm definitely in the middle of that group. This is lit fic for the first half, and then it gets fucking crazy and fucking weird almost out of nowhere in the second half. There's like little sprinkles of it in the beginning, but you don't really know how absolutely insane it's gonna get. It's so fucking weird. This was for a video I did about characters that are insufferable, and I really had fun with hating the characters in this book. They felt insufferable in a very real way, in a way where like I felt like I could know these people and meet them. Like I understood where they were coming from with their misery and with the way they spoke to people. It was just fun. It was like a silly, fun little thing. A Touch of Jen is about this couple, Ayesha and Remy, and they're both obsessed with a woman named Jen, who Remy used to work with. When you read the blurb, it kind of seems like Jen is like an Instagram influencer, but she's actually just like a real person from their lives, which is so fascinating. And it's like such an interesting dynamic to have these two characters, both like equally but in different ways obsessed with this woman, and there's like not really a jealousy there. It's a fascinating dynamic. They end up running into Jen, which is crazy because they think about her all the time, and she invites them on a surfing trip, and so they go on this trip with her friends, and then crazy fucking stuff happens in the second half when they get back from the trip. I liked it. If that sounds interesting to you, you should read it, but if you're really into literary fiction, you will probably not like the twist that happens in this because it just gets so insane. I don't know what she was thinking, but I don't know what drugs she was on when she wrote this, but I would like some. Then I read The Catcher in the Rye. I've realized while making videos why people don't like tell you what classics are about, because you feel like a dumbass getting on the internet and being like, The Catcher in the Rye is about Holden Caulfield. It sounds like I think I'm the first person to read this book or something like that. So I'm going to tell you what it's about because I know some people haven't read it, but I'm going to feel like an idiot while I tell you. And really, there's not much to say because there's not very much plot in this book. The Catcher in the Rye is about Holden Caulfield frolicking around New York. He gets kicked out of school, and so he just like walks around New York, and he goes for lunch with some friends a couple of times. He gets drunk. There is more to it than that, but that is the core of the book. There's not a huge amount of plot here. You're mostly just hanging out inside Holden's head. I think I'm in the minority when I say this, but I feel pretty ambivalent towards The Catcher in the Rye. I don't really care. I'm just filled with this absolute indifference. I know people hate it or they love it. I think it was fun. I liked the kind of stylized writing. I think this very much captures what it is to be a teenager. And I like seeing the universality of that because this is from like, what, the 40s or the 50s? 40s. I love that it shows you the horrible parts of being a teenager where you're just like an asshole and you think you're better than everybody else and you're so fucking miserable, often for no reason. It was fun. It was fun disliking Holden. I felt like I disliked him as a human, like as I would any 14, 15, 16-year-old boy. He very much was the essence of that. It was cute. I think it could have been shorter. I still think this is the most beautiful cover I've ever fucking seen in my life. Then I read Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. This follows a woman who goes on sabbatical from her job as a bartender, and she's able to like pursue her photography, which is mostly taking photographs of men that she scouts on the street in like very sexually explicit and degrading positions. She's a horrible person, and she takes advantage of men. She assaults them. And it's so interesting the whole time. I just like ran through this book. I could not put it down. I loved her relationship with her best friend who's in love with her. Fucking fascinating. So complex. So horrible. I felt terrible for both of them, but I also hated both of them. I think my only complaint about this book is that it is aging really, really quickly. This has some like really like overly contemporary and like of a specific moment language in it that made it, even now, like just a couple years after its release. Wait, when was this released? Just a couple years after its release, it felt old. It felt like it was really like disintegrating while I was reading it. So I think you have to read this now. Like, actually, I think you have to read this 4 years ago, and it's not even that old. Other than that, I really enjoyed it. It was so quickly paced, icky, and like difficult to read, but also you can't put it down, so like you kind of develop a toxic relationship with it. Awesome. Great book. I love deranged, horrible women doing depraved shit, and that was the epitome. This was the epitome of that. Okay, I know I just said that I love deranged women doing horrible shit, but I did not like A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. I actually hated it. Reading the cover of this seemed like something I was really gonna like. This is about a woman who eats men. She's writing from prison about the men that she has killed and eaten in her life. But what she also is a fucking food critic. So this is one of those books that's about food. And I've learned that I hate books that are about food because it's really hard to do well. I think this book does not do it well in the way that it often just like endlessly lists these very luxurious and like high-class foods that I, as a normal human being, like most of the audience for this book, have no reference for. It means nothing to me when you go on this 2-page long rant about duck liver. I also think books about food often endlessly use food similes for everything, and it gets very fucking tiring. It's a hard line to walk where you want to maintain food as the central motif but don't overdo it, and I think every book I've ever read has overdone it, and this absolutely did. This book has, when you actually pick it apart, very little plot. There's like little tiny bits of plot, maybe 50 pages of plot. Most of this is lists of food and food similes or random fucking tangents about like the preparation of kosher meat or the history of the cleaver or what defines a serial killer by the FBI. It goes on and on and on and on and on about fucking nothing, and it is tedious, so grating, so boring. I really hated it. It was like the author knew that what I was here for was the kind of horrific elements of her, like, killing these men and, like, meticulously planning these crimes, and so was so long-winded with everything in between those parts that I was looking for, and then when she finally got to them, was, like, super brief. It would be like 2 pages. We've been building up to this for chapters and chapters, and now it's like, I'm going to tell you what happens within 2 pages. And that's it. There was potential here, and it was absolutely squandered by writing that was not good enough to do what it was doing. I'm sorry. I really hated this book. Then I read The Center, which is also a book that I did not like very much. This was one of the books that I listened to on audiobook, so take everything I say with like a huge fucking Himalayan salt lamp grain of salt. I just thought it was bad. I just thought this book was... Okay, let me tell you what it's about. This book is about a woman who's working as like a subtitle editor, kind of like a translator. She meets a man who's a linguist and he knows every fucking language. And he ends up telling her that he has learned all of these languages because he goes to the center, which is a place where you can spend $20,000 and stay for like 10 days. And in those 10 days, you can learn any language that you want. It's this very mysterious, under the radar, secretive place, and that's just like the story is about her discovering what's behind this crazy language learning facility. This book felt like it was trying to say everything and then ended up saying absolutely nothing. There was also this glaringly obvious class component that was missing and really should have been there. And I think that if you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about, but I don't want to spoil it for you. I don't know. I felt like the writing was not good. It was quite lazy. It was absolutely scattered all over the place. There's not like a clear narrative or plot. The problem is the woman who read this audiobook, I think, did a really good job. Like, she does all these different British accents, and so you can really tell who's who. She has a really nice tone. It's really easy to listen to. But like, I think that if I had read this as a book, I probably wouldn't have finished it. It's not good. Like, it's just not good. The whole thing is so all over the place. It felt totally incoherent, both in the story and in whatever messaging she was trying to get across and failing. I thought that the main character was annoying and not in a way that was fun. And the main character was wildly blind to her class privilege, which made it very hard to read. There was this dynamic between her and the man that she's seeing that introduces her to the center that I really wanted to see explored, where he had this like gender and race privilege because he was a white man, but she had this class privilege, and it just, there was like maybe 2 sentences where we talked about it, but not really. And the cat is about to step on my computer. Okay. He's such a dick. I don't even think this had potential. I think that this was kind of as bad as it in hindsight looked like it was going to be. I would not recommend this book. Then I finally caught up on my readings for school, and I read Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. This is a 600-page fucking doorstopper, and it took everything in me to get through it. It was a hard read. It's very dense. It's from 1847, so it's very old, and the language is very archaic, and it's boring. That makes it boring to me. I'm not someone who likes those elements in a story. My experience with classics is that I don't enjoy reading them typically. While I'm reading it, I'm pushing myself through it and I'm not having fun. I want to be reading more contemporary things with language that I don't feel like is a slog to get through. But then after I finish it and I sit with it, I'm like, okay, I see what you're doing. I see why people like it. I see what's happening with it. I see why it is what it is, but damn, it's just not fun. It's just not fun to read this book. There is honestly quite a bit of plot here, and if I cared a little bit more and was better versed in classical reading, I probably would have enjoyed it. I think that it is a fun, gothic, feminist story, and it deserves to be considered a great. It's just not like the experience of it. I don't enjoy it. It's not fun for me. I think this is worth reading, and I'm happy that I read it. I don't think I ever would have finished it on my own if I hadn't had to read it for school, but I'm glad that I had to read it for school. But do I ever want to pick it up again? No, I don't. Then also for school, I read Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. This is my first Woolf ever, and I get it. I understand why we like Woolf so much. This was amazing and like so innovative and like almost revolutionary. What she does with character and perspective is crazy in this. Mrs. Dalloway is really just about a woman planning a party. That's like the tagline, but it doesn't have any more plot to it. This is super, super, super about character and inside these people's heads and about their memories and them thinking about the past. So there's not much more to say about what happens in here because nothing much happens in here. It jumps from perspective to perspective to perspective in such a fascinating way that feels very, very, very skilled. The writing in this book is beautiful and like fun and almost funny, and it can be like quite relatable even though it is from 23 or 25 or whatever. I loved it, and it's small. It's not necessarily a quick read, especially because the beginning is very confusing and super hard to get over that. Like, it almost feels like there's a learning curve for Mrs. Dalloway, but once you're past it, it's awesome. I loved this book. There is so much cat hair floating around the room right now because of how much I'm having to pet the cat because he's in such a fucking mood. I'm sorry. I know the camera is picking that shit up. Next, I read The Vegetarian. She just won the fucking Nobel Literature Prize, which I understand why. Even though I kind of felt like this went over my head a little bit. This is about a woman's kind of descent into madness because of these dreams she's having that make her stop eating meat. And everyone in her life is really against her and her vegetarianism. And she ends up... Oh, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to say anything else, but there's a lot more to it than that. This really explores gender dynamics. It's a very interesting social commentary. It was great. It was really well done. This is very fast-paced. I felt like there was always something happening in this, and I really, really, really liked that. This is a book that switches perspectives chapter to chapter, but it doesn't go back to people. It's like 3 very long chapters that each follow one person adjacent to this woman. It starts with her husband, and then her brother-in-law, and then her sister. Each chapter is equally well done, equally interesting, and has a unique voice, which is honestly, I think, hard to do. And I don't see it often with a book that changes perspective like that. This was super weird and super visceral, and I think that it was rife with a symbolism that I just did not grasp because I have not been able to focus very well. I think that I want to reread this because there is so much more to get out of this book that I just didn't quite get, but I know in my heart that it's a really good book and very well written and very well translated. The last book I read, I listened to, and I don't have it, and that was Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. I just recently finished this. It is a 600-page book and a 27-hour audiobook. So there's like a lot, and I still feel like I have to sit with it. Like, I feel like it's festering within me, but I do know that I really enjoyed it and that it was masterfully done. It is kind of a political horror, which is crazy and amazing, and like maybe my favorite genre of book. I need more of that. It mainly follows this boy who is the heir to a cult family who do a crazy, like, violent, horrific rituals in the pursuit of immortality. There is so much more to it than that. It's fucking insane. Like, wow. Okay, first of all, what a slow burn. It's long. It's a really long book. But I didn't hate that about it. Usually I want, like, let's go. Quicker pace. Like, give me some plot. This had plot. It just, like, it built up very intensely but very slowly, and I did enjoy that, weirdly enough. Do not lick yourself behind me. I think this book left a lot to the reader. It didn't talk down to me. There were a lot of loose ends that were tied up but not super explicitly. Like, you kind of had to be reading between the lines to come to closure on everything. I also got kind of unexpectedly quite emotional at the end of it. I think because I had spent so long with these characters, but maybe I was also just like in a weird headspace when I was listening to those last 2 hours, but I was feeling heartbroken. I was feeling really heartbroken. It is a devastating book. I think people say that the metaphor for Argentina's like political violence is a little bit heavy-handed, and I can see that, but I don't think it was a problem. I don't think this book had many problems. I think it was just really well done. I don't know though, because I listened to it on audiobook, and the woman who read it was awesome. She did oh my god, she did such a fucking good job. First of all, it felt like she knew every language in the world and could do any accent. But also there's this, oh my god, okay, there's this character who has no lips. The woman reading it did such a fucking good job of a voice of someone who doesn't have lips. It was fucking terrifying. Like, actually, I'm so glad that I was listening to that while the sun was out, because if it was at night, I would have had to fucking turn it off. It was so scary because it was not like, she didn't do it over the top. Like, it was subtle. Like, the woman would speak and you would hear just little tiny sounds that she couldn't quite do right because she didn't have lips, like a V or a P. So it would be like a relatively normal voice and then just like a little bit muffled and a little bit fucked up and a little bit skewed. It was awesome. It was so good. I recommend listening to it on audiobook, but also, like I said, it's a 27-hour long audiobook. So that is a hard commitment to make. Yeah, I have to think about this book more. I think that there was just so much and I really can't get all my thoughts together. That's the video. That's everything I read this month. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.